So you don't think they pose any threat to the United States?
Who in particular?
The ISIS or Al Qaeda?
I think they pose a very limited threat to the United States. I think they pose a greater threat to the United States today than they did in 2001. I mean, what is the last 20 years of war have had many effects. 15,000 US military personnel dead. That's uniformed personnel and contractors. Hundreds of thousands coming back with PTSD, traumatic brain injuries. The death toll in the war zones has been far, far worse. 3 to 4 million people likely dead in Afghanistan, Iraq, Pakistan, Yemen, Syria, in the part of the war the United States has been involved in. Tens of thousands, tens of millions injured in these war zones. And $7 trillion that the United States has spent on these wars in the last 20 years. What has it produced? In addition to all that death and suffering and what we didn't spend $7 trillion on, there are more militant groups now than there were in 2001. This war has, in its own terms, been a complete and utter catastrophe and disaster. And I don't think people, I mean, we went back to the 70s and Vietnam. I don't think people see the last 20 years of war in the same way they saw Vietnam as the disaster that it was. The last 20 years of war has been at least as disastrous, at least as catastrophic for the United States, for the world, as the US wars in Vietnam and Southeast Asia. And I think we have to recognize that, because indeed, I think there are greater threats to the United States today than there were in 2001, but I think they are still very minimal. We're talking about a small group of people. ISIS controls almost no territory now. And Al Qaeda is a fraction of what it once was. So I think it's really dangerous to overinflate the problems and to respond to these problems with war. That was the first mistake the Bush administration made. The attacks of 9/11 took about 3,000 lives. Terrible for the people affected, for the families affected, absolutely. The United States, the Bush administration did not need to respond to those crimes with war by invading a country that had the vast majority of people in Afghanistan had no responsibility for the attacks of 9/11. The Taliban gave sanctuary to Al Qaeda, but was not involved in planning or orchestrating the attacks of 9/11. The United States should have responded to those crimes of that day, September 11th, 2001, as crimes, responded with criminal justice responses, with criminal justice agents.
What does that do? How do you do that? What does it? These are people that are willing to put their lives on the line to show your weakness. These are people that's a achievement if you do that to them. How are you going to get to the people that did what they did to US?
No, that's indeed. I think that the problem was that by giving them the war they wanted, that was an achievement for them. In the past, US governments have responded to terrorist crimes as crimes. And research shows beyond the US, around the world, that responding with warfare tends not to be a very effective response to terrorist acts. That responding with diplomacy, with intelligence gathering, with criminal justice responses is far more effective than war. By giving Al Qaeda and Osama bin Laden a war, it gave them exactly what they wanted in a much larger platform for recruiting, for building their movement. And I think the past 20 years shows what a disastrous choice that was.
So if you like this little short clip from an interview I did, click over here to watch the entire interview. And please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.